You're listening to Music Tectonics.
Welcome back to Music Tectonics, where we go beneath the surface of music and tech. I'm your host, Dimitri Vitsa, and I'm also the CEO and founder of Rock, Paper, Scissors. We are a PR firm that specializes in music and technology, the combination, the overlaps, the Venn diagram, both of them.
You should trademark that.
I like it.
Venn diagrams.
Oh, you can tell this one's going to be a good interview because I've already got the laughter of Kirt Debique here with me. Hey, Kirt, how's it going?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Dimitri.
Yeah, great to have you too. Kirt is the CEO and CTO of Syncfloor. I've had the privilege of working with him on the rock, paper, scissors side of things, but we haven't had you on the podcast yet, so I'm so excited to dive in.
I'm in.
And you do a podcast as well, which we can talk about in here as well. So
yes, Sync Love is something that we're doing with the first podcast season is going to show up in the next couple of months here, and we actually have an editorial site that's out now at synclove.com.
Awesome. Well, we I don't even know if I plan to ask you about that, but let's talk about that. But first, let's get people started if they haven't heard of Syncfloor. What is Syncfloor?
Sure, of course. So Syncfloor is essentially two things. First and foremost, it's a marketplace of commercial music. Available for use in productions of all kinds: advertising, film, TV, video games, podcasts, etc. And we've built this marketplace around a technological concept called natural language music search. And so we make this really fun, intuitive discovery available for people coming in to find music. And then we make it really hassle-free for them to license the music, because we focus on the rights being really fully controlled with our partners, such that, sort of the end-to-end purchase feels more retail-like. And so that's the sort of core thing that we built. In addition, and you'll find that essentially if you go to syncfloor.com or songsforpodcasters.com, those are sort of expressions of that particular marketplace that we've done. Secondly, Syncfloor is a platform, and in particular a platform to allow websites, services, and applications to connect into great music for use in their scenarios. And that's something that we're seeing more and more of in today's world. So from fitness to podcasting to gaming, all to programmatic advertising, there are all these different scenarios where people are wanting to get access to a corpus of great music in a way that fits their needs, both technically and economically in terms of integration. And so we are providing a platform to do that. The first instance of that platform is what we've enabled for our partners so that they can actually expose storefronts for their catalogs. And we call those things sync stores. And, sync stores are, in some sense, you can think of it as very akin to Shopify. In terms of what we provide for our partners there. But we continue to extend the platform so that people can use it in all sorts of use cases.
Okay, so let me see if I've got this right. If I want to license music for something like a video, for example, maybe I'm a small business and I'm doing a commercial, or maybe I'm a music supervisor at a major studio or something like that. I can go to Syncfloor and I can do some searches and find some stuff.
Or if you're a podcaster like Dimitri, you can go find music there.
Right, yes. So that's one. Two, you have this ability for other people who are building platforms of their own. You mentioned fitness, maybe other types of apps. You said programmatically created advertising, marketplaces, video makers, things like that. They can actually plug in, is it through an API to get access to the same catalog?
That's right. So where we started with that is that we first said, oh, well, what if we could take the same stuff that we use to build syncfloor.com and songsforpodcasters.com, those marketplaces that people come in a turnkey fashion to find music to license. What if we could actually expose that such that our partners can actually say that, hey, if you come to my website and you're browsing my music, you can go to a sync store and actually search for the stuff in my catalog. That's kind of how it started. From there, we actually then extended it so that if you're browsing and you're looking at an artist page, you can directly go to commerce for music licensing for an artist. And then we extended so you could do that for a song, so that actually in some of our partners' sites, like you're literally on a page with a song and there's like a little license button, kind of like a PayPal button, and that goes straight into commerce for music on that song on our site. And so we said, okay, what if we could really kind of extend the platform so people could have lots of deep levels of integration into music licensing commerce? And then once we started doing that, we found that on the other side, clients, and so fitness is a great example, started coming to us and saying, hey, I'm a boutique fitness service, and I'm trying to create a great video on demand library of classes for my clients, for my subscribers. Where do I get easy access to a great corpus of commercial music that's high quality, and that the terms are set up such that I can really, make that work for me in terms of what I'm trying to do? And that's where we started saying, well, wow, we can continue to extend this platform such that people can use that both in a no-code turnkey fashion, as well as if you wanted to deeply integrate it into a mobile app a la Clubhouse, and adding music to that, for instance. And so that's sort of something we're leaning into now as well.
Got it. Okay. So it's almost like, I see it almost as three different pieces, like a self-service website, a Shopify-like experience for existing catalogs that you're already doing deals with, and this integration opportunity with other apps and platforms that just want to.
You got it.
Cool.
You got it.
Gotcha. Well, I was going to ask you how Syncfloor differs from other web portals that do sync. You mentioned some of them right there. Give me a minute before we get into the natural language processing, because I do want to dig into that, but let's not go there quite yet. It seems your focus is on commercial music, not production libraries. That's another difference. And on independent music, not major label content.
That's right.
Let me ask you, I've got some guesses, but why those two?
Why we did that?
Those
yeah,
two
differentiators. Of course. Well, where we saw the opportunity. So maybe to take a quick step back, I came at founding with my co-founder Sejan McFarland, Syncfloor, based on my own experience having a small independent music label in Seattle called Brick Lane Records. And coming out of that, what we saw was this gap in the market where the use cases for music are just exploding. Right, like there are lots and lots of places where people want to integrate the use of music, both in traditional media sense as well as new entrants in terms of small businesses and independents doing podcasting, or startups doing games, or what have you. Lots and lots of people were like, hey, I want to go find some music to use. And as it turns out, the independent music sector has the most beautiful, diverse corpus of music that I could imagine for use in this. But it's a very difficult sort of ecosystem to navigate because it's very fragmented. So if you sit there and you think, okay, well, where do I find that great music? You could go to the thousands, tens of thousands of possible, even at the label publisher level, right? In terms of these small independents. And then of course it expands even more if you think about artists. And so, there it was like, how do we help people navigate that ecosystem? And so that's where we thought about this idea of aggregation of commercial music. And then the other part was that rights around music is very complex. So a lot of times when people go to production music libraries, they're going there because the price is at a certain point, but also that they don't have to think about all of the other aspects of, the rights that they have to get, and are they getting all the rights for stuff, and, et cetera, et cetera. But usually they think, okay, what I have to compromise is in terms of, quality and diversity of the music I'm going to use and how well it will lift my narrative. And we said, you don't have to make that compromise, right? Commercial independent music, if we do our jobs right, we've aggregated and curated the best stuff for you to come and in an intuitive, fun way, find the music you want and in a really simple, straightforward, hassle-free way license it. And so that's where we saw the gap. That gap isn't there for major label music. In fact, with major label music, it's almost a different kind of thing, right? It's that the price points are not where they want it to be, and the rights regime is super complex. And so people, tend to be like, hey, you know what? I'm not even going to try to worry about that unless I'm, a major studio willing to deal with, for instance, that type of thing.
I have a question for you. Maybe this is stupid. Look, I know a little bit about sync just from being in the business for a while, and I understand that there's two sides to the license you need there, because obviously you need the recorded side and you need the publishing side. The songwriters and the rights holders and administration on the writing of the song, the writing of the composition, the lyrics, and so forth. But then also you're using somebody else's recording of that, and so that's the label side or the master side. So I understand that that's part of what you're talking about. Is it's hard to navigate that song by song. What if one says yes and one says no, or one wants this money and one wants that money? It's complicated. So you've set up the system where all that stuff is pre-cleared for the use of video in sync. But now you're talking about podcasting too. I don't know what the license of podcasting looks like. Is it the same as sync? And then what about these other use cases? Do you have to renegotiate those pre-cleared licenses for those different types of uses as well?
Right. So the way to think about it isn't so much from the perspective of pre-cleared. I think is maybe the first thing that I'd say is that. So you're exactly right that um, the music, part of the complexity there is that there are these two sides, the recorded side and the composition side. And then it gets even more complex because usually, especially on the composition side, there are multiple writers involved. And if there are multiple writers involved, there are potentially multiple entities that are representing those writers involved. So
Fun
you can
stuff.
very quickly, you can very quickly go from, okay, I'm looking at a song to I'm negotiating with 3 or 5 or however many, business entities that have some rights in that song. And that's where a lot of the complexity lies. And so what we've done is we've said, we're going to curate not only the best quality independent music from the world's best labels and publishers into our marketplace, but we're going to make sure that the portions of catalogs that we bring in from those are what are called one-stop catalogs. And so what that is that each partner for the songs in the catalog that are represented in Syncfloor, they own all of the rights, both sides, right? So you're really only talking to one person. And the analogy I tend to give is that imagine if you went to Airbnb and you found a place that you liked and you said, hey, host, I'm ready to book this place. And they were like, hey, that's cool. Let me go talk to the building super and my roommates and my mom and the guy down the street at the pub.
What about the architect? You got to talk to the architect.
Okay, right? And so you got to. That's what you get when you're dealing with this sort of multiple rights thing, right? What's called multi-stop. Whereas what we've done is we have one stop, so you're just talking to the host, and you kind of do your deal there. And so we provide that framework so that it's hassle-free and straightforward.
Got it. Great. All right. You mentioned a little bit about your background in a record label, but I stalked you on LinkedIn. And I looked at, you were at Microsoft for 20 some years. It looks like you got promoted every year. There's like a different title each of those years practically. I did a lot
of stuff. Yeah.
How did you go from working at Microsoft for 20 some years, starting as a software engineer, to getting into music tech and sync and what you're doing now?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I started at Microsoft and as a software engineer, and over time, sort of did software architecture for large systems and general management of large engineering teams. And when I first got there, actually, one of my first projects that I spent a lot of time on was on multimedia. And so very early on, I got into the multimedia game. I worked on some operating system stuff for a while, and then got into multimedia and worked on that for quite some time. And so I really always had this, real passion around, sort of multimedia and technology and how those things came together. And of course, a passion around music. And then, sort of 20, so I would say 20, call it 2010-ish timeframe. By then I had, Seattle, which is where we're based, has this amazing community of artists and musicians, and I had connected with a lot of them in various ways, partly because I was making music and so on. And I remember distinctly, like around that time, as I was thinking about what sort of the next thing I was gonna go do was, I was winding down some major projects. And I had kind of thought to myself, wow, I've watched this disruption happen in music multiple times, and each time the independent music ecosystem is the one that's really hard hit by it, and tries to figure out sort of how to find new niches and things like that. And I was like, how can I potentially help with respect to these people that I care about? And so that's what led me to start the music label. And so I left my full-time job at Microsoft and said, okay, I'm going to go start an independent music label.
That's
I'm
Brick Lane Records, right?
Brick Lane Records, that's right. And I'm going to build Brick Lane around a set of principles in terms of how we negotiated deals with artists that were really, especially at the time, very, very artist-leaning and artist-friendly. So we were like, it's always artist majority splits. No lock-in in terms of projects and stuff like that. It's always one project at a time. We said that the artists always see revenue immediately, so there's no recoup type thing. You see revenue immediately. This is an investment, not a loan, right? And so those principles, which nowadays people are starting to really rally around those things in terms of trying to be artist forward and artist friendly. But at the time, it was very, very different. And in fact, I remember negotiating with the management and legal team for one of the artists we signed, and they literally asked us. They were like, "So, are you guys a nonprofit?" Because they had really friendly terms, and we're like, they should be that friendly, kind of thing. And so you really get a sense for like, okay, well, this was a bit of a different way of thinking about it. And that's where I, sort of learned the music business and really learned the gaps that were there, especially in terms of providing and getting opportunities for independence, and as such, how we could maybe take music and technology and put them together to do something great.
Gotcha. Makes a lot of sense. Cool. We're going to take a quick break for an announcement. And when we come back, Kirt, I'm going to ask you a little bit about what you've seen since that time with the label, how licensing for music, film, video has changed in the time since you've been involved. We'll be right back. Let's meet up next Tuesday. We host Together Tuesdays, a virtual meetup in the Music Tectonics community app, the social network for music tech. Starting at 2 p.m. Eastern, that's 11 a.m. Pacific or 7 p.m. in the UK, join the Music Tectonics team in the app. Post, comment, share links, and use the tag Together Tuesday to get involved. Ask each other questions, discuss recent podcast episodes, or share the music tech and music biz news of the week. And if you're a member of Clubhouse, I'll be there at the same time for an audio-only music tech chat. In our app, look for the hashtag Together Tuesday and use it in your posts and comments. Every month, we will feature our favorite interactions on the podcast. If you're not on the Music Tectonics community app yet, I'll tell you how to join in at the end of this episode. All right, we are back with Kirt Debique from Syncfloor, the CEO and CTO out of Seattle. And we were going to ask you, how has licensing music for film and video changed in the time that you've been involved with music?
Sure. So, first and foremost, I'd say that, you're taking it out of, film and TV, let's say traditional things. What the first thing we've seen is that, where people want to use music has completely expanded. And so I talked about the fact that we're seeing all these new verticals wanting to integrate music in really interesting ways. And what we talk about is this use music everywhere thing, right? Because we think music is an amazing thing for lifting narratives of all kinds, right? And creating an environment that's better for entertainment or fitness or what have you, right? And so that's, I think, one of the big things we've seen is just this expansion of the use cases. In addition, we see new entrants in terms of the characters in the play, if you want to call it that, right? So it used to be that you're a production professional, and that's who is doing, sort of dealing with finding music and licensing music for some kind of film or TV thing. But really now, right, you find, Dimitri, the independent podcaster, who's, going to be looking for music. You find the startup, program manager or product manager who's going to be trying to figure out how to get music for their, application. You find the fitness trainer who is also the person who's doing the editing for the classes for the new boutique fitness startup, right? You have the freelance, producer, right, who's trying to help lots of different production companies, large and small, find ways to actually do shorts or do ads or do content marketing. Right? Content marketing has become this huge thing, right? And content marketing are like little stories that also help lift your brand. And so the more people that get involved in that, including small businesses. Recently we had a podcast license for somebody who was the principal at a psychological services small business, right? Who is looking for music to put into their podcast because that podcast was part of their content marketing story for their business, right? And so you're getting all these different kinds of people who are coming into it, and therefore they don't have the language, right? And the tools or the understanding of all the complexity that it has to, that, licensing music for a production, needs. And
or the legal budget.
Or the legal budget. So they need these really simple, straightforward solutions for finding the music and licensing the music. And so
right.
that's exactly where we are.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm curious, do you have any direct experience in film and video as well? Because I know you mentioned the label and that pathway and the technology. The third leg of this stool would be moving picture, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And my experience there primarily has come through the label because with the artists that we had, we funded music videos of all kinds, right? Ones that felt like little shorts and were really complex and multi-day affairs, and ones that were really simple, or we've done ones that are sort of animated things, et cetera, et cetera. And so what we found ourselves sort of learning over time is the ins and outs of what it means to create a production and manage a production end to end. And that has really given me a ton of empathy for the work that producers and editors and music supervisors and people of all kinds, directors, creative directors, et cetera, all have to do and deal with when they make stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. So we've talked a little bit about some of the emerging use cases for music licensing. Are there any others we should touch on before we dive into this whole idea of natural language search, which I'm so excited to talk to you about? But is there anything else that's like bubbling up that you're seeing new use cases for music licensing?
Yes, well, we talked a bit about things like fitness and things like podcasting and so on, which are sort of new non-traditional things. We're also seeing some interesting motion is in terms of tools. Like we think the first example I give is with respect to podcasting. So there's having turnkey solutions for people to actually go find music for their podcast. But as you probably well know, the evolving landscape for podcasting is starting to lean heavily on tools for making it easy for people to create,
really
edit, and produce their podcasts.
Yeah.
And that's what you need when things starts to explode in terms of who, again, the characters in the play are, right? People of all different levels of experience wanting to do this. A great example is something like Descript, right? Like making it really easy for people to kind of bring the stuff in and edit it so that it feels clean and sharp and things like that. And so what we're saying is that, hey, boy, if you're going to be in some kind of canvas or an editing environment for doing this, wouldn't it be great for there to be a programmatic way for those tools to incorporate access to music? And so that's another interesting example.
Oh, I mean, yeah. Now that I'm making a podcast, I'm totally looking at all those tools. We use a couple different things for production, but also on the marketing side, with the headliner videos or Wave, things like that, little apps that make those videos.
That's the cool thing, right? Most people, and still think about podcasts as this audio thing, right? But podcasts are essentially moving towards being audiovisual, right? And so as you get that, they're actually becoming, little shows and getting more complex productions. And so you again have another place where you have to think differently about, how you bring music in. Another interesting use case, is also looking at all what's happening across social. So social, Clubhouse is a great example. So if you take something like Clubhouse and inevitably all the Clubhouse clones that you're going to see over the next
any minute.
Exactly. Right. You go from something where you have a lot of momentum around people sort of ad hoc coming together in rooms, and then the people start to actually make those into events, and then people start to record those events so that people can kind of see them later. People start to want to actually create time shifting around those events. So imagine if you could DVR what's happening in a room so you could come at it from, right? So like all those things like you say, okay, well now what happens when somebody wants to have music in one of those rooms? And therefore you have music that's also recorded in one of those rooms. And it starts to bring in all the same stuff. We tell people, like, look at what happened with Twitch, right? In that, sort of Twitch has to deal with all of the backlash that came from not having that full story realized around what their customers wanted to do, i.e., have a live thing and then have it recorded and then put it on YouTube, right? And having the access to music be really simple, because music was an important part of that. And so that's we're saying that, hey, as you start to look at all of those use cases, up front, look for the platforms that provide you with a great way to integrate music, and we're one of them.
Kirt, it's kind of interesting because if you look at the digital history and narrative of the music industry, you go, obviously downloads and then streaming. So you've got this music streaming, and it took quite a while for that to turn into a business model that was effective, even for the creators of the music. I mean, you're still wondering about profitability on the music streaming services versus being a loss leader for hardware, advertising, eyeballs, all that kind of stuff, right? But it's now to the point where it's replacing quite a bit of the revenue that was lost when physical started to decline. And then you had this moment in between where sync, like traditional sync for film, TV commercials, kind of started to fill in. And there was a lot of focus. People kind of shifted their focus from selling commercial recordings to doing synchronization for film and TV and commercial, because there were millions of dollars there all of a sudden. And there's kind of an interesting sidebar story about, the Netflix, Hulu's, HBO Max, Disney's of the world. They have so much more content that they're creating because people are binging and watching so much video content with so
more
little
opportunity for licensing.
Right. But at the same time, there's this emergence of music use in social media sharing. And all of a sudden, there was some tensions, just like the tensions there were with streaming services and so forth. Then there were these tensions around social media, and you started to see the Facebooks and the Instagrams starting to do licensing. The YouTube's trying to figure out their content ID system and the
Mm-hmm.
monetization sharing, the revenue sharing, all that kind of stuff.
That's right.
And so it's kind of interesting to think about Sync played this little parallel world role, but now it's like with all the social sharing and the user generated video stuff, it's like a whole other huge bucket of possibility that you're talking about.
That's right. Yeah, and in some sense, it's music licensing writ large, right? And you know, I think really what we're seeing as an opportunity is to step back and think, okay, look, you can't even predict all of the new interesting ways people want to combine music with scenarios, right? But all of it means that in some sense they want to be able to, and most businesses want to be able to have that stuff covered under clear terms and clear licensing, right? And in some ways, some of them want it to be, you know, sort of real time and programmatic, so that the experience that they're delivering is one that feels really seamless and organic and things like that. And there's really a dearth of available platforms for allowing that to happen. And that's where we need to go next with respect to music licensing. Even if you go back to stuff that's semi-traditional, what's really been happening is that you went from people doing, let's say, advertising in ways that were, you know, big budget, complex productions, and a certain number of them, and that was certainly attractive, to now, you know, the content that's being created that, you know, is essentially advertising, i.e. content marketing. There's tons and tons and tons of that stuff just being made, right? And so you have, even whether it's a big company or a small company, looking to license stuff, you know, lots of a larger volume of stuff at a different price point, because they're just churning out lots of content. It's the way to stay relevant, is to have interesting content there. And of course, music is all about making your content interesting, all about lifting the narrative in there. So
yeah, cool. Yeah,
lots of opportunity.
Lots of opportunity. So there's this other piece of Syncfloor that we haven't really gotten into yet, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. I want you to tell me more about the natural language search function that's behind Syncfloor. Why did you go that route? How does that change the experience for someone who's looking for music? What are we talking about here?
Yeah. So you know, so it came from, you know, again from that experience with the label. So, you know, we were trying to figure out how we attached to interesting synchronization opportunities, and were represented by a couple of different, you know, sort of sync agencies and so on. And, you know, what we found is, as at the back end of that, we would see sort of these briefs that would come across, right? So essentially the way the process worked, right, and still does work to a large degree, right, is people would, you know, sort of send a paragraph creatively describing what it is that they wanted to have the music represent or do or lift, right? And that you know, sort of paragraph of sentiment and references and things like that, because people would include artistic references or song references and things like that in those briefs, right? That's what somebody then at the other end would have to interpret and try to figure out by digging through their own crates of music what might match that, right? And it's really looking at that where we said, well, you know what, we're not going to replace, you know, the human element here, because the human element is important in terms of the final overall interpretation of if this thing is going to be right when lined up against picture. But what we can do is make digging through the crates much more fun, much more intuitive, much more productive. And the way we felt we could do that is to say, well, what if the language that you use to creatively describe your desire for music, could we interpret that and create essentially a translation into a taxonomy for music that was rich enough to bring back results and to bring back enough transparency about those results that you would actually feel like you were in a box of irrelevant stuff, right? And with enough transparency that you could actually use your human filter to decide whether in that box of relevant stuff you want to actually pull that particular one to listen to, because your ear time is incredibly valuable. And so when we looked at that end-to-end problem, we said, well, boy, we think the technological trends are such that we could go add our own creativity and IP to this idea of actually, you know, a new form of search engine, right? One that took natural language, describing a desire for music, and in real time could return results of music. And so that's what we built in terms of natural language music search. And that was patented late last year. We received a patent for it.
So I want to dig in just a little bit more. So when you say natural language search, what you're saying is instead of having drop downs or tags or filters that
Yep,
you're
that's
like, you're like selecting, this is what I'm picturing in my head. This is the emotion that evokes. This is the scene, or this is the content
exactly.
marketing storyline, whatever. And how do I match it up with what this filter is so that I can see how things have been tagged? You're literally typing into the search box, I'm hoping for something that's takes place in a quiet, sunny day with da 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 da, and somebody talks to somebody or whatever.
and you know what we found is that people didn't necessarily want to describe the scene to us, because the interpretation of the scene and what music the director or creative director or producer wants to line up with that scene may actually have juxtaposition that's actually different from the scene, the content of the scene itself, right? So if you've seen some of the great pieces of art, you're actually putting something that you would be unexpected against a particular scene. But what is really clear is that they could tell you in really sort of creative, natural terms what it is they were looking for out of the music. And so, like, an example that we show people is that, you can click one of our visual search blocks, because on top of the search engine, we've built all sorts of metaphors for accessing this type of functionality. And one of them is very visual. And, if you click on, the visual search box that says something like dazzling dance hall, the search that runs is looking for bouncy, delightful dance hall music to shake your body at a party or something like that, right? That's what I tell people usually is that you can't really type that anywhere on the web and get something useful out of it. Or
who knows what you get if you type that on the web, Kirt.
Exactly. So or get the music that you're looking for, right? And the thing is, you can type that type of thing into our system and get something interesting and relevant, because we take from the vertical understanding that you're looking for music. We say, well, how can we interpret that creative expression of what you desire and understand characteristics that are relevant to that. And what we found is that when you combine that type of creative expression, that sentiment expression, with the ability to also interpret references. So you can also say things like, I'm looking for thoughtful indie folk like Sufjan Stevens with strings. Right. And when you say something like that, we can actually out of that pick out the fact that, oh, hey, yeah, we recognize that you said an artist. Oh, you recognize you said a sentiment. Oh, you said a genre. Oh, you said an instrument, and you wanted to have that. Right. And bring back for you something that's interpreted all of that interesting data that you gave in that simple sentence fragment.
I bet you have a lot of people who just want to go and play with the search.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And the fun thing for us actually was that once we got that engine working well, we were able to then say, well, what are the metaphors that allow somebody to iteratively get into this process of being able to express their desires? And so then we went super visual with it, right? So, when you go look at our site, there's all this like visuals and copy that like kind of drag, pull you in, because you're like, whoa, what's that about? And they all turn into searches. And so that starts to teach you the idea that you can actually express your desire in all these interesting ways. And then we went further. We actually went and said, what if we could take reference? So, remember talking to a producer at an ad agency, and he was like, I'm a film geek. When I start a project, I'm thinking, oh, I really want it to sound kind of like American Beauty, or I really want it to sound kind of like Lost in Translation, or I want it to kind of sound like Halo, right? And so then we said, well, if we could actually describe those things in the creative, expressive terms that our engine understands, i.e. just type in the description for it, right? Then it could actually then go map, your expression that just says, I want something that feels like Halo, right? To a bunch of really interesting characteristics and bring back that back for you. And so that actually then took things to another level, right? And so we still think that there's tons and tons of room for us to continue to innovate here. And so we're really excited.
Is it true you have a poet on staff?
Our staff is amazing. We have lots of amazing musicians, people who are poets. We have across all sorts of genres. Our music. So when we built our music analyst team, we felt that what we really want is people who were in touch with music and the feeling of music in a way that was significant, very visceral. Right. And so ultimately what you end up doing is finding, these amazing, musicians and artists and having them participate in that process analysis, right? So
I love it. I think it's so much fun to think about how much work went into looking at lyrics and talking about what represents feelings and melodically.
And we still do it today, which is super fun, right? We'll sit there and have super deep debates about classical music and how you want the taxonomy you want around class, which by the way is really hard. The class, doing a good classical taxonomy is one of the things that time and time again most music systems end up doing a bunch of stuff around mainstream or even independent music, and then they go, oh yeah, classical music, we need to tack that on.
It's a whole other species.
And that's why you sometimes have these specialist services, right, that are just about classical music, because they know that people want to express things differently there. And so we're going through some of that same evolution ourselves. It's going, okay, did we do enough work around the classical taxonomy? Can we make that better and things like that?
I'm curious. Are you expecting for the search functionality and the engine to be used in other? I mean, this seems way broader than Sync. It reminds me of when Pandora did their music genome. Except
that's right.
Theirs was a lot of acoustical stuff, and this lyric-based thing that you have going. As I'm sure that some of the emotions are also melodic and things.
Yeah, we sort of mix what we think of as sentiment and themes, and of course, a very deep in taxonomy around genre and things like that. So we have sort of a mix of a lot of different things that help us be sort of the type of high quality engine that we have. But it's funny that you say that. What we're seeing, especially as we talk about the platform for connecting sort of different use cases into music, we see that as one of the first big expansions of it, because when you think about what the platform provides, is it provides essentially discovery, secure media access, and a licensing API, a licensing action, micro licensing, and things like that. And so that's what you pull together to kind of say that you have a platform. And so discovery now gets sort of pushed into more use cases, because you want to expose it for people to do sort of interesting things that we don't even necessarily do in our marketplace, right? And so that's the kind of the first place. We have been asked about this idea of like, okay, what how do you couldn't this be used as a consumer?
Right, totally. On a streaming service
many times. And the thing is that as a startup, we kind of need to retain focus. We think that the market opportunity that we have ahead of us in the context of music licensing and being an engine for connecting people to this great corpus of music for licensing in lots of use cases is huge, and we have to focus on that. And we have this differentiating technology that lets us sort of wedge into that. We're open to conversations about other uses or things like that, but it's just not it doesn't help us to try to do everything. So we're like, look, we're going to go focus on the thing that we think we have ahead of us that's big.
Well, I do think this recent emergence in audio is going to create some interesting opportunities here, because audio search, using your voice for search, once you have the kind of taxonomy and sentiment analysis and all that stuff that you have that works with natural language, the way that people talk, because natural language is how people talk. And we've gotten so used to on typing with interfaces, with tagging filters and all like drop downs and all that stuff.
Drop downs.
But you want to just say it. Just, this is what I'm looking for. This is how I feel, or whatever. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. We got to take one more quick break. And when I come back, I want to ask you a little bit about the sync stores, because we touched on it early, and I just want to get a little bit of sense of who's using that and so forth. We'll be right back. We're giving Music Tectonics listeners the chance to speak up and win a prize. Every week, we pose a big question that you can answer in the Music Tectonics community app. At the end of the month, we'll choose the most awesome answer and send the winner one of my favorite books about music, business, technology, or just life. This month's prize is David and Goliath, Underdogs, Misfits, and the Art of Battling Giants by Malcolm Gladwell. Okay, you ready for this week's big question? When a song in the soundtrack perfectly suits the scene in the movie or TV show, you have sync experts and innovators like Kirt Debique to thank. What's your favorite sync placement? A musical track that makes a film, TV show, or ad great even though it wasn't written for the purpose. Look for the post that goes with this episode in the Music Tectonics community app. We'll tag it with the hashtag #TheBigQuestion, and you can put your response in the comments. If you're not a member of the app yet, we'll tell you how to join at the end of this episode. Now, back to the show. Okay, we're back. And Kirt, like I said, I want to ask you, you have these Shopify-like sync stores, you call them. I'm just curious, tell us a tiny bit more about that about aspect of the business. In particular, what are some of the companies that are using the sync store, and what kind of, what's emerging from that?
Yeah, so like I kind of touched on earlier, what we found was that as we built, the platform to enable us to build our own, sort of marketplace applications, our partners were also looking for ways to integrate, sort of access to their catalogs, and whether that be at a broad level or at an artist level or at a song level, or have their artists actually be entry points into licensing for their catalogs and things like that on their own websites. We found that everybody was kind of, having this huge desire to take the metaphors that we built and express it, but like locked down to their space as such, right? And so what we found ourselves doing is saying, well, you could use our platform to build that, right? And we can make it really easy for you to do that. And when we looked at what the sort of analogous things that were out there, it was just like having, like Shopify enabling people to build, retail stores, digital retail stores, right, on their platform. And we said, oh wow, yeah, we can do something similar to that for our catalog partners. So what you have is first and foremost, any catalog partner in our index automatically gets one of these things, and we have different tiers of them. And then the ones that are doing sort of really sort of deep integration are folks like Bodega. Bodega is an arm of Symphonic Distribution, and so they have a sync store that's really beautiful and very deeply integrated into their domain, etc. We have TuneCoreLicensing.com is another user of sync stores. If you go there, you'll see the familiar sort of metaphors and interface and things like that. 8dsync.com is another partner that does that type of thing. Motor Music in Germany. Also, if you go click on their sync button, it takes you to their sync store, and they have some really interesting integration that includes a visual representation of things that they've synced and so on. And so I can keep going. Two Dutch is another partner in Holland that does some deep integration there, and so we're finding everybody's looking to do it.
And so some of these companies they're basically, when there's sync opportunities, or when people are, whether it's sync or micro sync, are looking to license content, they can just direct them there, and it's like a turnkey solution.
That's right. It's a turnkey solution for them. They don't have to do a whole bunch, right? And that's what we're trying to enable, is both on our sort of, if you want to think of it as the sell side, so catalog partner side, as well as on the buy side, where people are trying to do other kinds of integration or trying to resell, our the content in some sense to others. They can build on these metaphors and expose it to their clients.
Cool. Well, I just have a couple more questions for you before we wrap up here, Kirt. We've talked a bit about this growing interest in sync because of all these new use cases and so forth. Where do you see that going in the next couple of years?
I'll kind of reiterate the key ones for me, right? First of all, I see, sort of new media, so podcasting is going to continue to explode. And I think people are going to be more and more, in order to differentiate yourself, are going to want high quality music that they can access and license in a straightforward way. And so I see that being a great place of opportunity. I see a lot of what's happening in the content marketing space as a great opportunity there, because companies, large and small, independent, small businesses, larger companies, are putting more and more content out there that is essentially walking the line of documentary and advertising, right? And you're going to find more and more of those things wanting to use great music. And then, sort of this deep integration of music into different kinds of things, like, whether it's in social fitness and so on and so forth. I think those are going to be, really, really interesting things happening in the next few years.
It is crazy to think about all these use cases and how its potential, the potential there is for growing the monetization of music as a whole. Like, right. If everyone becomes a creator, everybody becomes a music supervisor or a soundtrack maker for podcasts, right, or whatever it is. Right. It could be anything from UGC video content to audio, right, to things we haven't even thought about yet, right?
Exactly.
And so instead of people paying their fractions of pennies towards their streaming services, they're actually paying dollars or hundreds or thousands of dollars for one-time use of stuff. It becomes like a really interesting model for monetization in the industry.
That's right. And we're all, we're, in some sense, we're all becoming creators, right? So the creator ecosystem, the creator economy is exploding. And so the more creators there are, the more opportunity there is for creators to use music. And that means great opportunity for music licensing, and therefore for artists, and in my view, therefore lots for the independent ecosystem. And we're here to make that happen.
Yeah, awesome. All right, finally, are there any other music tech companies or trends that you're keeping an eye on? It's just kind of fun for us since we focus on so many different aspects of music and technology and innovation. Love it when we have guests come on just to see. We don't have to talk about anything you're doing, just something that you're like, oh, right, this is kind of cool. If I wasn't doing this, I'd be doing that.
I'd be doing that.
Anything come to mind?
Well, yeah, sure. when you look at what's happening, especially in the gaming space, and how gaming is becoming this, like, sort of big part of new media, right? And really trying to figure out what that means as gaming goes further into things like augmented reality and goes further into things like virtual reality and so on, and what it will mean for us to have music be a part of that. Right. I think that's a really, really interesting space. And so, when you look at what's happening with companies like, Roblox or companies, it's really, really, a space to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Well, great. Kirt, this has been a blast. Thanks for taking the time to talk this through with us and to tell us more about what you're doing. And, we've had you at some of our Music Tectonics events. Would love to have you back in that world as well. And hopefully we'll be at some music industry conferences someday soon and get to hang out together.
That's right. Thank you so much for having me on the show, Dimitri, and for working with us. And I'm excited to keep working with you guys and doing more events. And yeah, I agree. Hopefully someday be able to sit and have a beer somewhere and chop it up.
Awesome. Thanks again, Kirt. Take care. Hey, thank you for listening to Music Tectonics. If you like what you hear, please hit subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Become a part of the Music Tectonics community, a social network just for music tech aficionados like you. It's free to join. Use it on the web at app.musictectonics.com or find the mobile app for Apple and Android devices in the relevant app stores. Connect with people from all corners of music and tech, answer the big question, and meet me there on Together Tuesdays. There's more about the community app, this podcast episode, our annual conference, and our newsletter at musictectonics.com. Peace.
You're listening to Music Tectonics.